Good morning, folks. Today is Tuesday, April 16th, 2024. This is the Podman Community Cabal meeting. Today, we've only got one topic at the moment, so if you have something that you want to talk about afterwards, that would be great. Currently, we're going to have Vikas Goel talking about data production for appliance backup applications. And before we get into that, I'm going to put in a quick word for devconf.us. Whoops. Going to click my actual window that I'm sharing. Abstracts for call for papers is coming up next Monday. So if you're interested, please get those in. And DevConf US itself is happening on August 14th and 16th in Boston, Mass, in the US. So hope to see a bunch of you there. And with that, I'm going to stop presenting and hand it over to Vikas.
Okay, thanks, Tom. I think I have explained this, the data protection appliance, Veritas Flex appliance in the previous, I think a month or two back. But I can give you a quick summary again. And there are 2 or 3 different items I wanted to talk about in the same context. So Flex appliance is a data protection appliance. It's a multi-tenant appliance. What that means is that, again, it's a black box for our customers, and we ship a physical hardware appliance. So customers can deploy the appliance as like a platform that supports containerized applications. However, for our customers, the container part is transparent. It doesn't matter whether it's container or running in a host or some other form factor. The appliance supports the backup application, which is again Veritas proprietary. So we package the applications independently, and there are multiple such applications. So Veritas packages the application, sign the, for security reasons, sign them, and the appliance. Now there are different types of applications and different versions. So appliance customers can choose to upload their own version, their own type, and deploy one or multiple instances of those applications at the same time. And as I said, it's a multi-tenancy, is supported. There's a lot of security and segregation in terms of network, in terms of storage. All that is done. It's a HA appliance as well. With that said, one of the use cases of the data protection application itself, which is running in a containerized form factor, is, and these containers are running in non-privileged mode, by the way, very hardened and secure environment. One of the use cases is accessing the fiber channel devices. And the fiber channel devices, for that matter, it could be, let's say, ESX server, VMware backup, right? So ESX server is exposing LUNs for the devices as target, and the appliance works as an initiator in initiator mode, accessing those LUNs. The zoning, etc., is all customer configuration, which port, which ESX server, which LUNs are connected to. There can be multipathing also, for that matter. But again, in the multi-tenancy context, a customer, one instance of backup application can say, I want to access port 1, and the another instance can say, I want to access port 2. All the devices basically of port 1, and the other one, all the devices of port 2. That level of segregation can be done. So when the platform starts these applications, the container applications, at that time, whatever LUNs are available for a given port assigned to that instance, all of those LUNs are bind mounted or exported as devices inside the container so that the application can access them. Now, the application itself doesn't have an ability to create devices inside the container. We have restricted that access, the use of make node, etc. So, when the container starts, all the devices attached to the respective fiber channel port are exported to the container for backup purpose. Now, The VMware admin can on the fly change the devices, number of LANs can increase, right? More VMware, more VMs, more storage, the number of devices can change. Now, on the host using the UDEV, and there is a SCSI library, etc. Using that, it can auto detect the LANs. So on the host, you can see the LANs, any newly added LANs on the ESX server. So appliance can detect it. However, for us to make it available inside the container, the application container has to be restarted because at the moment there is no way to say that okay, I have discovered, but go and on the fly make them available inside the container. So that's one problem statement where the challenge is that customers get annoyed. They that I your host can see, but application is not able to use it because it can't say it, and I have to every time there is a change in the backend, the VMware or ESX data store, it requires a restart of the application, which downtime and planning, and there's a lot of memory also warm up needed for the backup application to get started working functional. So there's some sort of frustration. So there's one thing I was looking for, that how can we have the newly discovered devices exported to a running container.
So I am working on Podman update right now, and I just came into something very similar where there is the potential where we could have added new devices to the container, but I deliberately chose not to at that point. Largely because I feel like it's kind of it feels questionable to me whether we should be able to do this. I mean, our general answer to this would be if you can guarantee that all the devices are in a specific folder in /dev, you could mount just that folder into the container, and then you get changes within the folder, i.e. devices being added and potentially removed without having to change the actual container config. And even here, I should say, the Podman update case would have taken effect on container restart. There is no question that we can do this on a running container. I don't think we want to get into the territory of managing devices in the sense of Podman itself creating and removing them. That's the job of the OCI runtime. And the runtime only lets us update resource limits at runtime. It doesn't let us create and remove new devices. So I don't know if this is possible at all without restarting the container. And even with a container restart, it feels like something best left to just mounting a directory in and managing on the host the contents of that directory such that all the devices you want show up in it.
Yeah, so in the past, in a different context, not in the fiber channel, but loop device context. Can you give me a second? Sorry. In a different context, loop devices, we were sort of doing something similar, like moving the loop devices to a folder. Um, and then still, not rather than bind mounting the directory, we were still bind mounting the loop devices inside the container, but that's separate. There was a challenge with the Red Hat operating system itself, that um, when any other systemd service was getting restarted, it would nullify or make those devices invalid. And Red Hat support team suggested that we should not move the devices to a directory, let it be its original location. And then we had to change our this thing, the way we were doing it. So if you can talk more about how we can solve this fiber channel that basic uses moving to directory and without running into those kind of problems, I can look into that part for sure.
I think
Hi, I'm impersonating Malin right now. Why couldn't you just have a process outside of the container that is monitoring, say, UDIV, and then enter the container to add a device when a device shows up on the host?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm asking for actually. Is there a way we can do that? So UDEV itself is, um, as I said, is able to detect any newly discovered. So we can write another UDEV rule for that method that
Right.
there's
So if you had a specific UDIV rule for your container, then it could exec in as a privileged process and create the device inside the container. I don't think it could add a bind mount. So for rootless containers, it probably wouldn't work. But for rootful, I think you might be able to work.
So you're talking about a process running on the host or inside the container that can do it?
A process on the host that would enter the container to add the device, or at least enter the mount namespace to create the device. Maybe not enter the PID namespace so the container wouldn't see it.
Okay. Using make node or something you're talking about, right?
Correct.
We have tried that part also, and I think somehow we felt that there was some challenge in that respect. Now, I need to go back and see that in what scenarios it was a problem. Um, but there were some difficulties in that
Yeah.
doing.
So we don't have it. I mean, in the normal case, Podman's not even running at that point. So you have a little process conmon that's waiting for an exit code. So there's nothing running inside of the container. Now, if you're running a privileged container, you could also do stuff like escaping from, which is what I think Toolbox is doing. So Toolbox is playing around a little bit in this area where they escape the container and add devices on the fly. But in this case, I think, now you have to be real careful with this because if you're sticking a privileged process into the container, then you have to make sure that you want to make sure that the container processes can get access to your privileged process. That's why I said potentially just enter the mount namespace and don't enter the PID namespace to create the device.
Yeah, sure. I think, as I said, I need to go back and see what were the challenges with this approach.
Yeah.
And not in all scenarios, but there were scenarios when the devices were not not usable after creating inside that. So, but
Yeah,
okay.
you'd have to make sure that they were created with correct SE Linux labels and things like that. So
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when entering into namespace, of course, -z option will help there, right?
no, because the Podman knows about the -C. But there are. I mean, if you have issues with this, probably. And by the way, if you don't know who this is, Dan Walsh.
Yeah.
You could contact me, and I could tell you how to.
Sure.
Basically, you could just set the context based on the parent directory or something like that too.
Okay. So we are still talking about exporting the devices directly, not moving to a directory, right?
That's how you could do it without going to the directory.
Yeah, because moving to directory was all sort of like we were doing, and we had to revert that after moving to rel 8. In rel 7, it was working fine. Something in rel 8 changed that was invalidating the devices. So we'll see that. We'll get in touch then. Thanks.
Yeah. Contact me if you contact me, or at least point me to where the error is on rel 8 with you creating a device, because I could take a look at it and see if it's a permission things. But are you using rootful containers or rootless?
Rootful.
Yeah. So
Right now,
rootful.
all the containers
Rootful, we should be able to make it work without a
are.
problem.
Okay, sure. Sure. So that topic, I'll get back to you then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. The other one is somewhat similar, is about but the volumes, right? That applications running with some specific volumes, and the customer says, the user says that for this application, I want to increase the volume size by, let's say, 100 terabyte, 200 terabyte. Now, what that means is that internally platform will translate that size depending on the size new increase. It can create one or more new volumes and would want to export them, mount them into the same application container. Problem again today that anytime you want to add a new volume, you have to restart, right? Because the mount option is available only at the time of starting the container. So similar problem is there with the new volumes getting mounted.
I mean, you could do the same hack. You can basically join the mount namespace and mount the file system, I believe, right?
Yes, you can mount. Yeah, if you join the mount namespace, you can manipulate
Yeah.
it.
If you join the mount namespace without joining the full container, then you should be able to mount, although would you lose sight of the mount namespace at that point?
What do you mean?
Well, if I join the mount namespace, if I'm trying to create a directory in the host operating system, I join the mount namespace, I no longer see the source.
Yeah, the only place it would be visible is inside the container, mount namespace. It wouldn't be on the. It wouldn't be visible on the node.
Yeah.
And of course, you have to be rooted from mounting a block device.
So is this something, can there be a wrapper around, clean interface, which can do something similar? I'm looking for something in a supported fashion, right? That when we do something, it is supported, doesn't go like unsupported.
I mean, the supported way of doing this would be to use something like AutoFS or some kind of system where you could, you'd have a directory that you mount into the container, and then you'd mount these additional volumes into that mount point. But by default, say we'll use an example. I create a container with a mount point at /mount inside of the container.
Yeah.
Now later on, I have, and it has another directory underneath it, mount/foo. Now, if I create a mount, if I mount onto that mount/bar, then the container will see the new mount point.
Yes, again, this approach 6 years back when I started this appliance, I thought of, but there was a security problem I think I found in that approach, that from inside the container you could delete or unmount some sort of thing. Again, it's been a while, I'm not able to recollect, but there was some security problem I found that was not viable option, mounting a Uber directory, parent directory. So that's why we didn't go with that approach. But is there a challenge with providing a mount option at the runtime when container is running and then you want to mount a volume?
I just don't know how. I mean, we would run into the same problem that you're talking about. I mean,
No, I'm talking about directly mounting, not in a parent directory. The way we mount it at the time of starting the container, can there be an option to say that
but
for volume mount to this container?
the way we start a container is we create a mount namespace, and then we start mounting into the mount namespace different directories. Then we enter the mount namespace, and from that point on, we can't really mount anything after that.
Yeah.
Can't mount anything because we won't be able to, because we mounted over /. So we're not going to see anything on the host at that point. So even if you had a privileged process inside the container, it won't be able to mount stuff from the host unless the stuff from the host gets mounted onto a volume that's already mounted into the container.
But you just explained, right, that entering into namespace again, say mount namespace, a privileged process can do it.
But I think once you enter the mount name, see the previous case, we created a mount namespace. And then the final step is we basically switch processes.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
bind mount from one namespace into another could be tricky.
Yeah, you want to bind mount from one namespace.
From the node's namespace into
Yeah.
the container's namespace. Now, this is something that I don't think is implemented right now.
It should be possible with new kernel APIs. With the new mount APIs, you can first open a mount and then join a mount namespace and then do the actual mount on the FD, stuff like that.
Okay. Oh, so open up a mount with that to a node and then hold it with an inode.
Yeah, something like that.
I mean, we are talking RHEL 8 here, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, but in general, I think this is really outside of the business of Podman because OCI runtimes do the mounting, and currently there's no way that OCI runtimes update a running container with like mounts or something like that. As Matt mentioned earlier, the only update is resource limits.
Yeah. So you would have to ride this through the OCI if you wanted this to be supported by Podman. Because we would have an issue, obviously, if we used other types of OCI. Obviously, this would not work with WASM. It wouldn't work with something like C-Run VM or Kata containers, things like that. So it'd be very difficult for us to special cases. So I would say this would probably be best to be a tool outside of Podman.
Yeah, Paul, you just talked about kernel having relate, kernel having ability to do that. So is that some system calls?
Yeah, there's new system calls, and I think I don't even know if they're in RHEL 9, but probably in RHEL 9 and beyond. There's a syscall where you can open a file, basically open a file descriptor to a mount, and then have that mount point, then join the mount namespace. So you're doing it in 2 steps. So you'd rather than 1 step, which currently I don't believe this would work. So you have to have if you have an open file descriptor that points to the previous mount namespace, then you have to use it inside the new mount namespace.
Okay. Is there a reason why it's not implemented in the container engine technology, not just Podman, but other, if you consider Docker, etc.?
I think it's brand new. I mean, it's within the last year or so that this feature showed up.
And I'm talking about just that mounting a new volume inside the container itself that Docker, Podman, none of these support. Is there a reason behind that? I was reading very old blog or some response on GitHub of yours, Dan. Somebody had requested something similar. It's been 4 years maybe or more. And you mentioned that there could be some security issue with that. If we allow mounting a volume runtime when the container is running, there could be some security issue.
Well, I mean, you get the security issues would be if I leaked access to files from the host into the container. That's why it'd be more about you have to be very careful when you do it.
Okay. So basically, if you trust your process is running on the operating system or whoever is
right, I would be more worried. I mean, usually I consider what's happening inside of the container to be untrustworthy. So that's where I'm looking at is if you just start mounting directories in without careful, then the process inside of the container might be able to gain access outside of the container.
But isn't it that same thing when you try to start a container with these volumes? Isn't it the same problem?
Yes. It's just you're expanding the problem.
Just expanding the problem. Yeah, I mean, one way or other, we are doing the same thing, right? That either mount running or restart the container to make it happen. But the process, the privileged process on the host that is making it happen.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you could, if we built it totally into Podman, then we could do it with, to make sure that all the security functions line up. The problem is if you do it out, if you just inject something into the container, then you're likely to hit things like user namespace problems, SE Linux problems, and potentially some other issues. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So you have to, it becomes your problem if you want to inject a new mount point into the container. You have to make sure it's labeled correctly and it's inside the correct user namespace.
Okay. So relate the way Paul was suggesting, relate in relate that is not possible, right?
Yeah, and Rel 8, from Podman's point of view, I believe is complete, right? There's not going to be any more updates for Rel 8 for Podman. Is that right, Tom?
I'm just asking for that kernel ability, that update. Is that possible in relate, or like if we were to write our own custom some program?
I don't know. I don't know if that was ever backported to Rel 8. I would doubt it. But
Yeah, I don't think it was. And the only updates we're doing now are critical bugs for pretty much for real.
Podman, yeah. But I'm talking about whether the kernel backported the ability to the new mount API.
Yeah, I looked at this last year, and then it wasn't the case, and unlikely that it is the case now.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and Rel 9 has it, right?
I would figure yes.
Okay. Okay, that's a good info. I think I'll go back and evaluate these options: Rel 9 versus Rel 8 mounting going into the namespace, and those options. Let's see how it happens. We'll come back with findings. Okay. So thanks on that also. And the third and last part is not strictly tied to Podman, but more of like kernel plus, but it is in the container context again, that iSCSI support. That's not, there's no namespace for iSCSI that you can create. So you can't have multiple containers manage their own iSCSI devices directly running in container, right? You need to have only one privileged container, which again is not something can be used in our environment. The data protection, these applications, for example, Nutanix, they expose the iSCSI devices and they say that, you know, you want to back up over iSCSI. That's preferred for various reasons rather than NFS or other protocols. So
I mean, usually we rely obviously on bind mounts. So the iSCSI would be, we would prefer the iSCSI be managed outside of the container. In order to manage something like iSCSI inside the container, you're probably going to need capsysadmin, which is pretty much going to give you control over the system.
yeah, and it will be the similar problem like fiber channel I mentioned, but I think you talked about over there that privilege process creating the device inside. You will see that.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Linux kernel only allows you to manage a very small subset of file systems without capsysadmin. And those are all the ones we allow in rootless mode. All right, you can't even do NFS right now.
There was a, you know, few years back, there was some
Thanks for noting that, Dan. I knew that was one of the things I was going to bring up at some point.
A while back, there was somebody from SUSE or somebody trying to make iSCSI namespace aware. but that didn't go in the Linux open source. So want to understand, like, is there a challenge with making iSCSI namespace aware that's not there yet?
I'm not sure what that, well, when you say making a namespace aware, I'm not sure what they were trying to do. Usually a remote API, like, we're basically doing some kind of network storage. If there's any enforcement on the server side, it's going to come in conflict with the user namespace. So that's the classic problem we have with NFS mounts, that we might be in a user namespace and the NFS mount server side doesn't know about the user namespace. But other things that we want to make a namespace aware, I'm not sure what else they would be looking at.
Yeah, what I meant to say is that you can have an iSCSI server running inside containers, and there can be multiple such containers. So, but they have their own network namespace. So again, our networking is in such a way that
Okay.
every container is through MAC VLAN. They're independent. They're not sharing any network namespace. Any two containers, they don't share network namespace.
Mm-hmm.
So they are totally independent, isolated. And these application containers can then, what we want is that run their own iSCSI servers, listening on their own network namespace.
Yeah, I think the problem there is again that the kernel, there's probably kernel information being passed back and forth that the kernel can't ensure isolation on.
Right. And that's where I was talking about making it namespace aware, because today it is not. It's a in the kernel namespace, so you can't run it in multiple network containers. Yeah. So the patch I saw for making it ability to containerize was pretty content, not a lot, but it didn't go through. Somehow they, for some reason, whatever reason, I don't know, they
Yeah.
didn't merge into the open source.
I would contact the developer and see if he has any comments on it.
Yeah, it's been like 4 or 5 years when I saw that patch was created. But I thought Red Hat was also working on something similar from that comment or something.
Yeah, we don't, I wouldn't know about that. I would contact the Red Hat kernel file system teams, like Stephen Whitehouse or one of those guys, and see if they have any comment on that.
Okay. Okay, I think those were the
Okay.
topics I had. Yeah.
All right, great. Thanks, Vikas. And I think that is all the topics that we had in advance. Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask about or talk about today?
I guess I had an issue that's come up that I want to make everybody aware of, that running Podman in emulation mode, or Podman commands, or Scopio commands, or builder commands in emulation mode is not going to work. So anybody that attempts to run, say, Podman that are a QEMU user static application doesn't work, because Nalin figured out that programs that re-exec itself using QEMU user static screws up argv0. Ordinarily, argv0 should point to the executable that's re-execing itself, and for some reason, in emulation mode, the emulation puts argv1 into the place of argv0. So if anybody's ever tried to run, say, a Podman build with a Podman command inside of it on a different arc than the native arch, you're going to see weird errors there. Podman complains about the second parameter. can't find. In the case of one I was doing with Scopio, it comes up and it says can't find slash. Can't exec slash or something. And so it's just something that a lot of people are, now that they're on Macs, are attempting to run things in emulation mode from an ARM system to an x86. So it's something that everybody should be aware of. That if you start seeing these types of issues, that's because they're running in emulation mode. I don't know how we can fix it, but it is what it is.
You emulate the whole VM. Or use a Podman.
Yeah. No. But yet another reason to push back on people asking us to support QEMU user static.
It's great, but it does have some limitations.
Yeah.
Dan, aren't you the one asking us to support that?
Yes. Well,
Okay. And is anyone
I'm not
else weirding
asking,
out that the
I did-
Nolan's picture is speaking and Dan's voice is coming out?
yeah, we're both in a conference room, but we got here late and didn't decide to hook up the conference system. We just hooked up. Alan's already running talk.
If it makes it easier, you can just pretend my Dan Walsh impression is flawless.
I like that better.
Well, Alan's been living here for a while, so he can talk the Boston accent pretty well.
That's not all right to you, Brad?
Is the QEMU user static thing, is it declared as a bug and like, is it going to be tracked upstream?
It's been tracked since 2020.
Oh, another one of those. Okay. Thank
This one
you.
you can probably write a patch for.
Yeah.
Other things like the multi-threaded, the part where the program you're emulating depends on, well, call certain APIs that you can't call when you're multi-threaded because the emulator is usually compiled multi-threaded. That'll fail too.
Oh, really?
I mean,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
there's some court cases that we ran into.
There's also, I know you can't use any set UID apps while you're in.
Oh, yeah, that's another one.
Yeah. So there's quite a few.
I mean, you can
But
configure it.
there's a lot of people pushing to use QEMU user static, but I support it. And as I've been playing with it, I'm finding it less and less useful. Just because it's going to blow up in weird ways that we're not necessarily able to explain to the customer. But they're going to come up more and more because people are jumping onto Macs.
Yep. Okay, any other topics or questions? While we're thinking about that, I'll just go for the next meetings that we've got coming up. Our next meeting for the Cabal meeting will be on May 21st, 2024, again at 11 a.m. Eastern. That's UTC -5 at that point in time. And then our next community meeting will be a couple weeks after that on June 4th, also a Tuesday at 11 a.m. And that again is Eastern Daylight Time, UTC -5. One last call for topics, questions, announcements.
Yeah, Tom, the next time we do one of these, we should probably try to get the Podman Bootsy team to do a demo.
Okay, I will add that to the possible topics.
But if anybody hasn't seen it, it's pretty impressive.
Anybody else have any other possible topics for next time? If so, let me know or add them to our agendas. And with that, I'm going to thank everybody for being here today and for the talks, and I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you, guys.